My name is Megan, I'm 45 years old, an illustrator living in the suburbs of Portland. My little house has a rose garden out front, where I often sit for hours sketching children's books while sipping herbal tea. That peaceful life came crashing down one Tuesday afternoon. The very afternoon I thought my husband would return from his long business trip. But he didn't come back alone. The moment I opened the door, Logan, my husband of 17 years, walked in with a blank expression and placed a thick envelope on the table. Before I could ask a single question, he said in a cold tone, "These are the divorce papers, I want you to sign them. Oh, and starting next month, make sure you send me $900.00 every month. You don't do anything anyway." I stood frozen, staring at him like he was a complete stranger, but it wasn't the divorce papers that stunned me, it was the woman standing behind him. Ava. Ava, my best friend from high school, my maid of honor, the person I had trusted with every joy and sorrow in my life. Now she stood there, clinging to Logan's arm with a smug smile, as if everything I once had now belonged to her. I took a deep breath. 100 questions swirled in my head, but only one sentence left my lips. "A divorce, fine?" They both seemed taken aback by my calm reaction. Logan raised his eyebrows as if he couldn't believe I'd respond so simply, but I knew that silence was just a shield, a fragile one, because at that very moment something had begun to stir inside me. A plan. I didn't ask why, I didn't need to, it was all painfully obvious. I just looked at Logan, quietly picked up the file and walked into my studio. As the door clicked shut, I heard Ava whisper to him, "Told you, she's not gonna make a scene. Someone that weak? What's there to be afraid of?" I sat down and placed the divorce papers in front of me. My fingers trembled, but not from heartbreak, from fury. Fury at myself for not seeing it sooner, for letting two betrayers step into my home and my life, wearing the smug look of winners. Logan used to say I was lucky to have him, that he was the one putting up with me while I just drew pictures and wrote some unprofitable kids' books. I believed him. So much so, that I didn't notice how I was slowly suffocating in a one-sided marriage, one where love and respect only flowed in one direction. But not anymore. I stood, walked to the mirror and looked myself in the eyes. No tears, just Megan. The woman who had once been soft, now turning steel cold. That night I emailed my attorney, the same one who handled my illustration copyrights, and asked him to review every asset under my name. I also reopened a secondary bank account where I'd quietly deposited royalties from my published work. The amount in it would leave Logan speechless if he ever found out. I'd been underestimated. And that was now my greatest weapon, because they never saw this coming. I met Ava when I was 17, back in high school in Seattle. Her wavy blonde hair always looked like she had just walked out of the wind, and her sweet smile had a way of disarming people. We shared a desk in U.S. history class. I still remember the first time she whispered to me, "You know the boys here are boring, I prefer ones who are already taken." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But year after year, Ava would accidentally grow close to her friends' boyfriends. And it always ended with her saying, "I didn't do anything. They were the ones who made the move." Still, I stayed close to her, partly because Ava had a way of making you feel special, the other part, maybe because I thought I was different. I believed she'd never do that to me. Especially since she was the first to know I liked Logan, the guy in my advanced art class, who later became my husband. When Logan confessed his feelings, I was shocked. For most of senior year, I thought he liked Ava. They had worked on an illustration project together, and I'd seen them laughing in the library more than once. But Logan chose me. And Ava surprisingly smiled and said, "I'm happy for you, really." And I believed her. We went to college in different cities but stayed in touch. On weekends, the three of us, me, Logan, and Ava, would meet at a little coffee shop downtown. We called it our safe corner, where there were no assignments, no exams, no pressure. Just warm lattes, soft jazz, and laughter. When I was 28, Ava told me she was engaged to a man named Graham, an architect at a big design firm in Chicago. The first time I met him, I thought, finally, Ava's in love for real. Graham was calm and thoughtful, the opposite of the flashy guys she used to date. He listened when she talked, never interrupted, always refilled her glass like it was second nature. I saw real affection in his eyes, and for once, I truly hoped her relationship would last. They married a year later in a lavender greenhouse she had always dreamed of. Logan and I were both there. I even designed their wedding invitations. Ava hugged me tight and said, "If I could trust anyone for life, it'd be you and Graham." But what Ava never realized was that trust doesn't mix well with betrayal. 3 years into her marriage, Ava began calling me more often. At first it was about work, then complaints about Graham. That he was too quiet, that he had lost his spark, that he didn't understand her anymore. I told her to talk to him, to listen, to try. But now I wonder, did Ava ever really want to fix it? Because soon after, Logan began acting strangely, leaving the house without explanations, chuckling at texts and hiding his screen when I walked in. And one morning, I saw him texting just as the message flashed on his phone, "I miss you too." I suspected something then, but I didn't have the courage to ask. I was afraid the answer would be exactly what I feared. Until that day, when Logan brought Ava into our house, dropped the divorce papers on the table and stared at me with shameless eyes. And I finally saw it. It had all started long ago. I'd just been the only one too blind to see. 6 years ago I was there, when Ava walked into the hospital glowing, cradling her 3-month bump. She told me before she even told Graham, her voice trembling with excitement, "Megan, I'm pregnant. Finally, I have something that makes everything mine." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. Back then it was Logan who offered to take her to checkups, claiming Graham was always away for work. I remember being surprised, but I smiled and agreed. After all, we were old friends. Everything would be fine if it had just stayed helpful. But day by day Logan grew obsessively attentive to Ava. He bought her vitamins, took her to ultrasounds, even kept track of her diet. I only found out when I accidentally opened his notebook and saw this written on the first page. Week 16, seafood. I asked, "What are you doing?" He shrugged and replied without blinking, "Just helping a friend. Can't you see how absent Graham is? Ava needs someone around." I stayed silent, but inside something shifted, undeniably. Logan's help gradually turned into nights away with excuses like Ava's having cramps. He even took time off work just to attend her prenatal classes. I reminded him that Graham should be the one going with her, that it would be better for their marriage. But Logan snapped, something he rarely did. "You're so selfish, Megan," he barked. "Ava has no one. All you do is sit in your studio drawing. You have no idea what it's like to be alone during pregnancy." I bit my lip and said nothing, not because he was right, but because if I said another word I would break. When Ava gave birth, it was Logan waiting outside the delivery room, not Graham. I found out from a nurse, who looked at me curiously and asked, "You're Mr. Logan's wife." "Oh, he's been so attentive to Miss Ava." I nodded, then quickly turned away to hide the wave of shock rising in my chest. After the baby, a little girl named Elise, was born, things only got worse. Logan was barely home anymore. He spent so much time at Ava's that neighbors started mistaking him for Elise's biological father. At first I tried to stay composed, but the third time Elise called Logan Daddy in front of me at a small gathering Ava hosted, it felt like someone had slapped me in the face. I quietly poured myself a glass of orange juice, avoiding eye contact, and stepped out onto the balcony, but Logan followed. "Are you imagining things again?" he asked, voice half accusing, half sarcastic. I turned to him. For the first time in months I looked him in the eye. "What are you doing, Logan? You treat Elise like your own. You're always at Ava's like she's the only one who matters. What about me? What am I to you?" He laughed lightly, like I had said something absurd. "Megan, you just don't get it. Ava needs me. Graham's not sensitive enough to care for her. I'm just doing what's right." "And I don't need you?" I asked, my voice hoarse from holding back. He paused, then turned away. "You're too independent, Megan. You don't need anyone." That line pierced me like an icy needle. Yes, I'm independent. I know how to take care of myself, to build my own world, but that doesn't mean I want to be forgotten, or quietly replaced by the person who used to be my best friend. From that day there was a rift between Logan and me that nothing could fill. He still moved between our home and Ava's, still used helping Ava as an excuse, but we both knew What was between them wasn't friendship anymore. That afternoon, as I was painting in the little studio behind my house, the doorbell rang. Steady and firm, like the person outside knew exactly why they were there. I opened the door and met Graham's deep, tired eyes. He looked more worn than the last time I'd seen him, dark circles under his eyes despite his neat appearance. In his hands was a thick file, bound in a brown leather folder. No small talk. Graham got straight to the point. I think it's time we talk. I invited him in and made a hot cup of coffee. Once we were seated, he placed the file on the table and slid it toward me. I hired a private investigator 3 months ago, he said slowly. At first, I just thought Ava was hiding something from me. I didn't expect it to be Logan. I didn't open the folder right away. My heart pounded, my chest heavy like a stone was pressing down on it. But I kept my expression neutral, trying to stay composed. Graham continued. They've been meeting at a hotel less than 5 miles from here, 3 times a week. There's video footage, receipts, even security camera images of them leaving together early in the morning. I went numb. No more denial, no more hoping I was wrong, no more excuses to shield me from the truth. Why did you choose to tell me? I asked after a long silence. Graham looked at me, his voice low. Because I know you're not like Ava. You have self-respect. And I don't want Elise to grow up in a world full of lies. He exhaled deeply, weariness in his eyes. I've thought about divorce, but Elise, she's still so young. I don't want to hurt her. I nodded. I understood. Just like I'd stayed quiet while Logan disappeared night after night, afraid that breaking everything would be too much for Elise. The child I didn't give birth to but loved like my own. I'm not planning to forgive, I said, voice steely. But I'm not going to blow this up either. Not now. Graham nodded. Then we wait. Wait until Elise is old enough to understand. Wait until our words won't wound her innocent heart. But in the meantime, we wouldn't stay idle. I started gathering evidence. Every email, text, Logan's schedule, even his suspicious credit card charges. Graham did the same on Ava's end. We shared everything quietly, like allies in a silent war. Ava and Logan had no idea. They kept playing the role of good people in front of others, still hugging Elise and smiling like life was a soft rom-com without consequences. But I knew the day would come, and when it did, I'd be the one holding the cards. I was no longer the naive woman who believed in a 15-year friendship, no longer the wife who sat by the window waiting for her husband to come home, pretending not to see the lipstick stains on his collar. I was Megan, the woman reclaiming everything she lost, one step at a time. Graham and I met every weekend under the pretense of co-parenting Elise or art lessons for the kid. No one questioned us. To outsiders, we were 2 mature adults raising a child. But only we knew. Every smile, every nod, was part of a long game. Once, as Elise napped on the sofa, Graham looked at me and whispered, I used to think Ava was someone I could trust for life. I smiled sadly. I used to think the same. No more words. Just a shared look of understanding and the resolve in our hearts that someday the truth would come out, not with rage, but with strategy, patience, and the quiet strength of those who have been hurt too deeply to tremble anymore. I found out I was sick during a routine checkup, when the doctor frowned at the ultrasound and said, there are some abnormal results, we'll need to run more specialized tests. I still remember sitting in the waiting room, clutching my medical folder, heart pounding like it was being squeezed tight. A week later, I got the results. A large benign ovarian tumor that required early surgery and long-term hormone treatment. Not life-threatening, but serious enough to keep me in the hospital for months of observation. I didn't cry, I didn't panic, I just felt tired. I'd always been the strong one carrying everything quietly, but standing outside the hospital room under dim yellow lights and the buzz of the PA system, I suddenly felt unbelievably small. I called Logan. Not because I needed him, but because I wanted to see if any sliver of decency remained in him. He answered on the 6th ring, voice indifferent. Yeah, what do you need? I hesitated, then said, I need to be hospitalized. For a while. Some health issues. There was silence on his end. I'm busy with work, but maybe I'll swing by, if I have time. That was it. No what's wrong, no what hospital, no concern. I heard Ava's laugh somewhere behind him. And I hung up. 3 days later, I lay in a hospital bed, IV in my arm, still working on a draft of my next children's book. I didn't stop, not for money, but because it was the one thing that still made me feel like I mattered. Elise, the child I once cradled, taught to draw and sang to sleep, was becoming more distant. After her 15th birthday, she stopped visiting often. When I texted, I'd get short replies. Busy with school, or worse, no reply at all. I knew what Ava was doing. I knew she was slowly creating a wall between me and Elise, maybe with vague words, maybe with twisted stories. She had always been good at manipulating feelings, especially those of a child. Graham still visited me weekly, bringing fresh flowers or pastries I liked. He never said much, just sat by me and talked about work, Elise, or sometimes our shared past. I don't know when it happened, but his presence became part of my healing. Quiet, steady, kind, in a world that had grown so cold. One day, Logan showed up unexpectedly. He wore a white shirt, wrinkled jeans, and carried a bag of fruit, the kind I'm allergic to. As soon as he stepped into the room, he said, "Just stopping by real quick, Ava's waiting in the car." I nodded, saying nothing. He looked around, his eyes landing on my half-colored sketch. Then he smirked. "You're still doing this stuff? With your condition, maybe it's time to take a break." I didn't answer, just turned the page and kept coloring. After a few minutes of silence, he muttered, "Heard you landed a big deal." I looked up and met his gaze. Curious, but not out of concern. It was the look of someone calculating. "Yeah, a studio wants to adapt Luna and the Hill of Light into an animated series. Contract was signed last week." Logan paused, then scoffed. "Wow. You're really something so good. You don't need anyone." I simply smiled. "That's right. I don't need anyone, especially not someone who was never truly there for me." He didn't say another word, just turned and walked out, leaving behind the fading shadow of a man who was once called a husband. And I went back to the colored pencil in my hand, sketching an open door that led to a new sky, one without betrayal, without mocking laughter, and without anyone walking into my life only to leave like they were never there. I had only stepped out of the hospital room for some tests, barely 15 minutes. When I returned, my phone screen showed 18 missed calls, all from Logan. Half curious, half exhausted, I hit call back. After just one ring, he answered, screaming, "Megan, what the hell are you doing?" I frowned. "What are you talking about? Why is there a foreclosure sign in front of the house? Why are Ava and I being told we have 3 days to vacate? That house is ours." I paused for a second, then gave a quiet laugh. "No, Logan, that house is mine. It's been in my name since before we got married. I paid the down payment. I paid the mortgage. I paid the property taxes every year. You didn't contribute a single cent." "I'm your husband," he shouted. "The least you could have done was talk to me first." I calmly sat back on the hospital bed, gently shifting the IV line out of the way. "We're already separated. The divorce is in process, and you know what? From the moment you walked Ava into my home like it was nothing, I stopped considering you a voice that mattered in my life." I heard something crash in the background, then Ava's sharp voice. "She can't do this. We're a family." I put him on speaker. "A family? A family built without honesty is just a fantasy, Ava. I'm just bringing the two of you back to reality." "Fine," Logan said, voice lowering, trying to stay composed. "But you still owe me at least $9,000. 0 cents. You promised to support me." I scoffed. "I never promised that. And if you still have a copy of our prenup, maybe take another look at Clause 12. Any property acquired before the marriage is not subject to division or post-divorce support." He went silent for a moment, then his tone shifted, pleading. "Megan, we were a real family once. I messed up, but now that you're so successful, do you really have to be this cruel?" I tilted my head back, staring up at the stark white hospital ceiling. Not because I was emotional, because I'd heard that kind of sugar-coated blame avoidance far too many times before. "Logan, I'm not being cruel. I'm just done being vulnerable. and I have nothing more to say. My attorney will contact you from now on." Then I ended the call. The next day, Ava sent me a long message filled with a mix of guilt, regret, and passive-aggressive blame, ending with, "You were my best friend. I never thought you'd take things this far." I didn't reply, but one question echoed in my head. Who really pushed things this far in the first place? My lawyer, Helen Rourke, a sharp-tongued woman in her 60s, swiftly sent a formal notice to Logan and Ava. She attached every financial record, bank statements, tax documents, and the title deed showing my sole ownership of the property. I didn't want anything more from them, I just wanted them to understand. I was no longer the woman who stood in the kitchen pouring tea for Ava or asking Logan about his meeting schedule. I was now the one who decided who could enter my space, and who no longer could. A few days later, Graham visited me in the hospital with a bag of walnut scones. My favorite. He sat beside me, showing me pictures of Elise at her school science project. Then, setting his phone down, he tilted his head and asked gently, "Are you okay?" I nodded with a soft smile. "I just closed a door. But I don't feel empty. I feel relieved." Graham looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded, resting his hand lightly over mine. "I think it's time you build a new door, but this time, one just for you." One March afternoon, after nearly 2 months of intensive treatment, my doctor cleared me to go home for a few days before starting the next phase of therapy. Graham picked me up from the hospital and brought me back to the small apartment I'd rented before treatment. A quiet space, with windows facing a backyard orange grove. Less than 3 days later, I received a surprise call from Mrs. Marjorie, Logan's mother. Her voice trembled. "Megan, could you come to the house? Things are spiraling out of control." I hesitated for a few seconds. I'd cut ties with Logan and Ava, but Marjorie and her husband Henry had always been kind to me. They were among the few who never turned their backs when I was at my lowest. I nodded and texted Graham, "I need to step out, something's happening at Logan's house." When I arrived, the once peaceful home was in chaos. Logan and Ava stood in the middle of the living room, locked in a heated argument. Elise sat quietly in the corner, phone in hand, eyes red and swollen. Marjorie saw me and walked over, gripping my hand. "Thank you for coming. She wanted to see you. But there's more going on." I stepped into the room with a mix of emotions, and before I could say a word, Elise stood up and looked me in the eye. She looked more mature than the last time I saw her, her gaze deep and resolute, far from a typical 15-year-old. "Aw, Megan," she said, her first time calling me that in months. I blinked. "Elise?" She took a deep breath, then turned to Ava. "I want to clear the air today. I've stayed quiet long enough." Ava frowned and moved toward her. "Elise, what are you doing? Family matters shouldn't involve outsiders." "You're not my family," Elise cut in, her voice so firm it silenced the whole room. Eva went pale. Logan stared at Elise as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Elise continued, her words slow and deliberate, like she'd rehearsed them for a long time. "The person I see as my mom is the one who stayed up all night when I had a fever, the one who held my hand as I learned to draw, the one who taught me right from wrong, and how to love without conditions." She turned to me, tears rolling down her cheeks, but her voice steady. "That person is Mom. Mom Megan, no one else." I didn't know when my own tears had started to fall. The emotion wasn't triumph. It was a heart that had been torn apart by doubt, finally finding healing in a simple truth. Ava, pale and trembling, whispered, "Elise, I gave birth to you." "But you didn't raise me," Elise replied, her voice now breaking, "and you never treated me like a child. You treated me like something to prove a point." Henry stood up, gently patted Elise's shoulder and looked at Logan. "Do you even realize what you've lost? Not Megan. Trust. Your daughter just taught you a lesson you'll never learn yourself." The room went so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Elise, I've known you were Logan's biological daughter for many years." Everyone turned to me, stunned. I overheard a conversation between Ava and her OB back then. I confirmed it. But I chose to stay silent, not because I was weak, but because I knew Elise didn't need a truth. She needed a safe place to grow up. I looked straight at Logan, no longer angry, just disappointed. You've taken a lot from me. But you can't take the love I have for her. Elise walked over and wrapped her arms around me. I'm sorry for trusting the wrong people for a while. But I won't let you leave me again. And in that moment I knew, no matter what life had taken from me, I still had something priceless. A child who chose to love me, not because of blood, but because of trust. And that meant more than any title ever could. The gathering at Logan's parents' house seemed to be over after Elise's declaration, but just as I was about to leave with her, a voice from the doorway froze the entire room. Sorry I'm late, I figured I should show up to complete the cast. Everyone turned. Graham stepped in, calm, composed, but with eyes sharp as steel. He looked directly at Ava, the woman who had once been his wife, and spoke slowly. Ava, you never officially signed the divorce papers. Looks like you forgot about that. Ava stiffened. What? The paperwork you sent 8 months ago was just a draft. No lawyer's signature, no notarization, and never submitted to the court. He paused, a slight smirk on his face. So legally, you're still my wife. Logan burst out laughing, a harsh, mocking sound. Oh, come on, Graham. A man your age still clinging to his ex? Wake up. I'm the one she chose. Graham didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone, typed a few lines, and held the screen up for everyone to see. I'm not clinging to anyone, but I do think it's important to clarify where everyone stands. Especially since this woman, he glanced at Ava, has been selling off our wedding gifts to scrape together funds for investments with her new boyfriend. Ava's face turned pale. Logan looked around nervously. All right, that's enough. This little drama isn't fooling anyone. You two think some righteous monologue is going to take me down? I know Megan's not rich. She's just a lucky illustrator. No way she has the power to flip the script. I smiled, a soft but steady smile. Actually, Logan, luck is only about 5% of my success. The rest comes from hard work and the silence of the years you never noticed. I pulled my tablet from my bag, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward the room. A series of regular deposits from 3 of the country's top publishing houses filled the screen. Current balance, $376,000, 0 cents. And that was just my primary account. My voice was calm and even. I currently have 3 active publishing contracts, an animated adaptation launching this fall, and 4 children's book series that stayed on the bestseller list for the past 12 months. Last year's income? Close to $500,000, 0 cents. Logan was stunned. Ava took a step back, her lips moving but no words coming out. I continued. While the two of you were busy betraying me and laughing behind my back, I was building an entire world of my own, a world that doesn't run on pity and certainly doesn't need people like you in it. The room went so silent you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Then Ava finally spoke, her voice strangely soft. Megan, I know there were a lot of misunderstandings before, but if you want, maybe we could start over? I looked her straight in the eye. No anger, no contempt. Just the look of someone who had let go. Ava, the only thing I ever wanted from you was honesty. And you couldn't give me that. A friendship that's been sold out can't just be put back on like an old sweater. There's nothing left for us to restart. Logan still stood there, eyes wide, like he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned away, taking Elise's hand. I don't need apologies, I just need everyone to understand. From now on, I'll live a life with no room for liars. Then I walked out of that house, with confidence in my eyes, a child who chose me as family, and 2 people behind me who once thought I'd always be the loser. They were wrong. And this time, I didn't need to say another word to prove it. A few weeks after that fateful gathering, word spread like wildfire through the small town. Logan was officially fired by his father, Mr. Henry, from his position overseeing a real estate development project. No one trusted him after the scandal broke. Mr. Henry, who had quietly covered for his son many times before, was firmer than ever this time. From now on, you'll have to earn your living, he said in front of me at a family meeting. And if you want to earn back any trust, start from the bottom. Days later, Logan was sent to the western Oregon coast to do manual labor on a deep-sea fishing vessel, where wake-up calls came at 4 a.m. and sleep meant swaying on iron bunks. He called me, once. I didn't answer. As for Ava, after losing all credibility and failed investments, she was forced to move into a run-down motel on the south side of the city. Her days were now filled with waiting tables at a diner, running delivery shifts in the evenings, and working warehouse weekends. Once someone who lived to paint her life in glamour, Ava had become a woman shrinking into the shadows. She lost custody of Elise not long after that meeting. The court ruled swiftly after receiving the documents from Graham's attorney along with Elise's own testimony. Graham was granted full legal guardianship. Ava was stripped of visitation rights unless expressly approved by the guardian. I saw Elise again on a May afternoon at the city's central library. She was reading a French translation of one of the children's books I illustrated, just released by a European publisher. "Why are you learning French?" I asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. Elise looked up, beaming. "I want to translate your books one day, Mom. I want kids everywhere to read your stories. Even if I'm living on the other side of the world." My heart swelled. I used to dream of a quiet world of my own, just painting, just peace. But Elise made me realize that what I create can go beyond that world and reach the hearts of so many more. My health was improving too. The treatment rounds were becoming less frequent, and the doctor said if my numbers stayed stable for a few more months I could be fully discharged with just periodic checkups. I returned to my brushes, to the vibrant world of watercolors and imagination where pain didn't exist. Or if it did, it could be healed through hopeful stories. One evening as I sat in my studio, Graham walked in, still composed but this time holding a bouquet of lavender. "I've been thinking," he said plainly. "If life gives you a second chance, I don't want to waste mine. Megan, would you want to start again? But this time, with someone who respects you and stays?" I froze for a moment. We had fought through so much pain together. He knew every imperfect part of me. And I knew his kindness wasn't fleeting, it had been tested by time and heartbreak. I didn't answer right away. I walked over, placed the flowers in a vase, then turned to him. "Would you wait for me?" He nodded. "As long as it takes." And I believed him. Not because of sweet words, but because in a world that had knocked me down so many times, Graham was the only one who never tried to change me. He simply stayed. Megan's story proves that sometimes the biggest losses lead to the doors of freedom and rebirth. Betrayed by her husband and best friend, she didn't collapse, she rebuilt, quietly and fiercely. Her resilience, kindness, and talent not only brought her justice, but also inspired the next generation. In a world full of wounds, she chose to live truthfully. And that's the most beautiful victory of all. What do you think about Megan's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, powerful, and meaningful stories about family and life.